Ahead.
All right, thank you, Nikki. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our October general meeting. We have a busy agenda, and so we want to go ahead and get started. And hopefully everybody was able to get the agenda and the other documents for the meeting. They were posted up on the PTSA website under meetings. So if you didn't pick those up, you can go ahead and open up the Wootton PTSA website, wootonptsa.org, and you can go ahead and take a look at the agenda, the treasurer's report, and the MD Maryland PTA emergency proclamation we're going to be talking about briefly. So as I've stated previously, and I wanted to update everyone on what was going on with Maryland PTA. So for those that maybe don't know, of course, we're meeting virtually with the situation that's going on right now. Maryland PTA has continued to not allow electronic voting when we're meeting virtually. So it means that our general meetings were unable to hold a vote. And because of that, we did meet outside in August so that we could actually go ahead and elect our officers and be able to vote on the budget. So we did do that. So Maryland PTA recently sent out an emergency proclamation to all PTA units across the state of Maryland. And I think what has led them to do this is National PTA has really had a lot of concerns with how Maryland PTA has been running. There's been many other issues besides how they're managing in this health emergency. And so National PTA put Maryland PTA on probation. And when they didn't comply, went ahead and notified them that they were going to be restructured. Maryland PTA went and took National PTA to court. The judge put a stay through October 22nd, which is coming up. And everyone's belief is that this stay will be lifted and National PTA will move forward with the restructuring, which essentially will be building a new Maryland PTA and removing the board and starting over. What they have told us is that they will, if that happens, we are chartered under Maryland PTA and they will just take our charter and move it over to the new version of Maryland PTA. So we will continue, which is good to know. So for this emergency proclamation that we received, so Maryland PTA has restricted us from doing any type of voting outside of in person. And now all of a sudden they've sent out this emergency proclamation and asked for us to respond to it quickly and let them know if we would approve this emergency proclamation, which would allow for electronic voting. So it really is kind of an interesting turnaround. And so we've been trying to figure out next steps on what to do. So if you haven't read it, if you would like to read it, it is up on the website. Just to give you a few brief points about it. In talking to a lot of other PTA leaders across Montgomery County, there's a lot of concerns with this resolution for multiple reasons. It's poorly framed. It creates layers, which is not necessary. The bottom line with it is that it would allow us, if it is voted for, to meet remotely and hold votes electronically. So I think that that's the positive about it. But all indications from everyone is that we should wait and see if this temporary restraining order that's going to be potentially lifted on October 22nd occurs. And so I have the ballot. I wanted to notify you about it. You can certainly share any thoughts that you have via the chat and via email. My email is in the, if you go on the PTSA website, you can find my email, and I'd be happy to hear any feedback that you have on it. We have 24 delegates in the Wootton PTSA. Delegates are signed by the number of members that you have. So for every 50 members, you get one delegate. So we have 24 total delegates, and so we can, and that's they have a certain number of delegates that have to vote for the emergency proclamation to make it go through. So for now, I think in following what all the other PTAs and PTSAs in Montgomery County are doing, holding up, waiting until after October 22nd, seeing what happens with national. All indications are that, that this is going to be lifted. There's a lot of attorneys that are talking with the Montgomery County Council PTAs, helping guide through the process. And if that were to happen, national is going to go ahead with the restructuring. And we're going to end up having the option to have electronic voting, which I think is very important. And for us to be able to conduct PTSA business, we really need to be able to do that. So that's just the quick update on that. There is a lot of media about it, and you can find articles about what's going on with Maryland PTA. There's been a lot of issues with money and how they've managed money. Apparently money has been missing. So there's a lot of issues, and National is dealing with those, and we are tracking it very carefully. So, we'll continue to provide updates as they occur, and that may be through our distribution lists and certainly as we meet. I wanted to update you on the fundraiser for the floor. Nikki is going to be talking about the budget, but we're continuing to raise money for an interlocking floor to cover the gymnasium. And that is for homecoming and for other events that occur in the gymnasium. It's to replace an old tarp that goes down and has to get taped down and takes a lot of time, and it's not comfortable to dance on. So we last year voted to move ahead with doing a fundraiser to raise money for interlocking tiles that are easy to put down, easy to put up and put away in store. And so we started the fundraiser last year, and we've continued it. We're working on getting measurements of the gym floor now. We haven't been able to do that with COVID. And so we're working with Wooten High School and the business manager there to get those measurements. And we'll be able to get an estimated cost for the tiles so that we'll know exactly how much we're raising money for. So that'll be coming sometime soon. On our agenda, we showed that we do have some open positions. We really want to get those positions filled. We appreciate all of our volunteers. We have an officer position for corresponding secretary. It's a very key role. That role helps to coordinate our meetings, the documents for meetings, and to manage our communications. So that is to coordinate with we have a website coordinator, we have a social media coordinator, and we have a newsletter coordinator. So that corresponding secretary is coordinating all the communications with those folks and using many different channels for communication. So it's a lot of management and coordination of the communication so that we're well coordinated in how we communicate to everyone. So we would love to get someone to fill that slot. So if you're interested, please reach out to either Nikki or I, and we will be happy to talk to you about that position. And we're hoping, that we can get that position filled over this next month. It is an officer position. It will require a vote. So once we have a candidate or candidates, we'll work out a plan for how we're going to vote for that position. But that'll be coming later. We also have parliamentarian. That position, I think, has been open for many years. But if anyone is interested and knows Robert's Rules of Order very well, then that's a good position for you. Let us know. We also have an opening for fundraiser chair or fundraising coordinator. It's a new position with the fundraiser that's going on for the floor and other fundraisers that we would like to do. We really would like somebody to lead that effort and help manage all of our fundraising efforts. And then finally, we have a position for the African American Parent Student Network. That position, that's a chair position, and that is open as well. And so we're looking for candidates to fill that role.
And actually, Brian, this is Shamil. I'm actually working with someone right now. So I think I have some help. So
perfect. Okay, that is great news. Okay, well, it looks like we may have the position filled. So great, thank you. Nikki, did I cover all the positions? agenda went off my screen.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, great.
Well, actually, did you mention the new position, the community liaison?
Oh, no, I did not mention that position.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
at our board meeting last week, we voted on adding a new position called community liaison. That position is to support our families that in need. That's to help to, provide any type of resources that are needed for our community. And we have a great coordinator for that position. I want to say her name properly. Jennifer Eisenfeld is joining us to manage that position. She had the position at Lakewood Elementary, did a lot of great things at Lakewood, and we're really pleased to have her join us to help us as a community liaison. And my last comment that I wanted to make is we have the capital improvement program testimony that's coming up. For those that don't know, Montgomery County Public Schools has two budgets. One is the capital improvement program, which is for the facilities, covers all the facility needs. It's on a 6-year cycle. And there's testimony, they have public hearings every year. And we've been working hard to get Wootton renovated for many years. And haven't had a lot of luck, but we started to have a little bit more luck last year, where they do have some money set aside or in the 6-year cycle for Wootton. And I'm blanking on the exact amount. I think it was, Ms. Bolden, was it 65 million? Do you remember?
I believe that was the initial amount, yes.
Yeah. So that's the initial amount. To renovate an entire school is about somewhere around 125 to 130 million. So the plan wasn't to tear Wootton down all the way to the ground. It's to really renovate, have a big renovation. So it wouldn't be a rebuild as they were doing previously. And then the other budget that I was mentioning was is the capital budget, and capital budget pays for all the things. It pays salaries and for supplies and training and things like that. So for the capital improvement program, there's public testimony. We have been for many years now bringing Wootton students to testify. They've done a fantastic job. No one knows about their school better firsthand than the students, and they really talk to that, and they're very impactful. We have 6 students that are going to be testifying for the hearing. So Wootton's hearing is going to be November 2nd. Richard Montgomery will be then, and then there's another school. We will again approach the mayor of Rockville to, and Richard Montgomery is going to be at that hearing as well. So they'll support both Wootton and Richard Montgomery in their testimony, and they continually support the renovations to Wootton and fixing the ADA issues with the building and grounds. So they're really helpful in doing that. Our students are going to be testifying. They're doing it different this year. So normally there would be, an in-person meeting, of course, and we go to the hearing room and we bring a lot of people and we make sure that we make an impact. This year, instead of doing a live hearing, which they decided not to do, which surprised me because it is a public hearing, they're asking for the testimony to be videotaped. So I will be talking to Ms. Bolden more about how we're gonna figure out a way to videotape all this testimony so we can do a great job. And then the board will be playing that testimony that night when they do the hearing, but it unfortunately won't be live, which I think is a bit disappointing. But I did want to update you on that, and it is really important. So we'd love to have you be there for that hearing. Again, November 2nd, 6 o'clock. We'll make sure to send out information about that as well. So and next on the agenda, who do we have next on the agenda?
So that's me. I'm going to do the treasurer's report and membership report.
All right, well, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so we'll make this brief. So you can see here at the top where our membership stands as of September 30th. Right now we're at total membership of 864. To put that in perspective, Last year, we were at 1,048, I believe, for the entire year. So we are slightly down, but considering the pandemic that we're in and the fact that we didn't have back to school night and we lost a big chunk of sales that we would normally get on back to school night, I think we're doing pretty well. We have met our revenue goal for the year. So right now, for receipts, we had budgeted a goal of $25,075, and we are at 28,610. So, overall, we had scaled down the budget, anticipating lower income because of COVID-19. So we've met our revenue goal for the year. So we're in really good shape. We've been doing a really good job with mock SAT and ACT testing. That's brought in more money than we budgeted. So we're doing pretty good for the year. Let's see our objectives. We haven't really spent a lot of money yet this year. We're still working on that, seeing what's going to be needed. We have put out mostly just grant money so far this year. So we do have other things in the pipeline that we're hoping to get off the ground. That's where we are right now. Does anybody have any questions about budget or membership? No? Okay, well, I'm gonna stop sharing, but before we move on, I just wanted to give a plug to our new the logo design competition that we are offering to Wooten students. If you haven't seen our emails, check out our website. All the details are on there. Essentially, we're looking for students to craft a unique logo that will only be used by the PTSA. And we will have that logo in our Squad Locker store so that you can buy apparel and whatnot with that logo on it. And then that logo will also be used on our website, basically for all of our branding. So again, all the details are on our website about the requirements. Essentially, really, you just have to be a Wooten student to enter, but all the parameters for the design itself are on the website. The deadline isn't until beginning of December. And you can feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. We're going to have more information on voting coming up, but basically the way we're going to do it is teachers are going to do the first round of voting, and then anybody who is a paid PTSA member will get one vote to do the overall winner. So I just wanted to plug that real quick, and we can turn it back over. Brian, next. I believe George is on. I don't know if Anand is on. George, are you there?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Would you, do you have any update on the MCC PTA? I believe there was a meeting the other night Anand had mentioned. Not sure if you have any details. You don't have to if you don't.
I don't really have any details on that. The last meeting was pretty much dominated by the Maryland PTA events, and then for us to vote in person, we had to go and on the next night go and vote in person for the resolutions that were brought up for the goals of the PTA, the
priorities, the advocacy
priorities,
priorities.
and yeah, so all those had to be voted on in person at the basically drive-through voting at the Carver. So
Okay.
that's pretty much it.
So once there are approved priorities, we will send those out. So those are the Montgomery County Council PTA's advocacy priorities. So those are the areas that they're going to be advocating for this school year. And so it's important that all the PTAs are aware of those priorities. And we have 3 delegates that do get to vote. George is one of our delegates. I am a delegate as PTSA president, and we have Anand, who is also a delegate. So we're represented with 3 delegates at the General Assembly, at the Delegates Assembly for the Montgomery County Council PTAs. Okay, well, so now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Bolden for any updates that she has.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here this evening. I wanted to start just with a sincere thanks to the PTSA for all of your work. We were at a board meeting, I want to say last week, and just to hear all the ways that the PTSA is serving, is supporting our school community, especially during this time. It's just really impressive and appreciated, particularly when we put into light that this is a volunteer organization. So to see and hear all of the ways in which they're supporting our students and our families and our community and staff, I really just have to say once again, thank you all so much for your concerted, consistent, and just really thoughtful ways in which you're going about serving our community. And I also want to say thank you and good evening to Jody for joining us this evening, and Chase for joining us and being the main event tonight. So I promise I won't talk long because I know that there are many on the call ready to hear the fabulous information that they're going to share. I just have a few dates, a few updates. We are in the midst of the first marking period. It ends very soon on November 6th. It's a Friday. And then grades are due for first marking period on Monday, November 9th. That is a professional day for staff, and students will not be in the building. So I just wanted to reframe a little bit that we are working towards the end of the first marking period and working to make sure that our students are in the best shape possible. And this time is going by incredibly fast on all accounts. And also there have been a few changes to the MCPS schedule. As you are aware, students were off on November 3rd for Election Day. All schools are closed for Election Day, but the county has since also made November 4th a professional day. So students will not be in school on that day. And so we also receive calendar guidance and how our schedule will reflect these days. And so we'll be updating our school calendar on our website and making sure we push out all the information in terms of how the days will be adjusted to account for those 2 days off. And the other change to note is that there were some half days, early release days that were occurring early November that are typically used for parent conferences. Those have all been moved to the week of Thanksgiving, the week of November 23rd. So students will have a series of half days starting the week of November 23rd. So I just wanted to point that out to you just so that for your calendar planning purposes. And we're also going to be working on a end of the quarter survey for students, for staff, and for parents. We really want to solicit more feedback about the virtual environment as we move into second marking period. And so we'll be putting that together and we'll be releasing that in early November. So I really hope everyone will fill that out so we can get some feedback in terms of your perspective, in terms of how virtual learning is going. I know it's hard for everyone, but we want to make sure we focus on what's in our control to change, to continue doing so that we can support our students in this virtual this virtual environment. If you're paying attention to MCPS and what's happening in the discussions around reopening of school, we're still in a virtual environment. That is still still the space we're in until January. However, we have started, there have been few more activities that are occurring on campus in very small, thoughtful ways. For example, last week we did all of the senior pictures, brought students in very small individual setting to come in and to sit for their senior portraits. And so as conditions allow, as safety allows, there will be some maybe smaller opportunities for that, for families and students returning to campus. At this time, however, it's still very strict and rigid. We don't have students, we don't have families in the building at this time. And as those conditions change, we'll of course keep you updated. And if there are exceptions like senior pictures, know that we follow all of the CDC guidelines for admitting our students into the school. And again, a thanks to the PTSA for making it a festive event, providing balloons, yard signs, supports, car magnets for our students. So when they came, there was a little rah, rah, rah from the PTSA and other staff members just to say, welcome back. So we really appreciate that. A few other items of note, we've been doing town hall, grade level town halls. We had our 9th and 10th grade town hall last week. And this week on Friday, we have our 11th grade town hall. And next week, Tuesday, we have our 12th grade town hall. It really is our admin chats that we do at the beginning of every year, but also some specific information as it relates to each grade level. We have a counselor present. We talk about athletics. We talk about the Zoom, the virtual learning environment, and really focus in on matters that pertain to each grade level. Our upperclassmen, of course, we're looking at what we'll be talking about here, preparing for college and getting all of that together. So we have those two events coming up for our students. And another plug from the counseling department to seniors. Hopefully we have a lot of senior parents on the call tonight because of the topic. If your student has not already requested transcripts to be mailed to their schools, please have them do so immediately. So we're working through and all of our transcripts are loaded to Naviance. Counselor recommendations are loaded. And so we can push that information out. They do not need to wait until they complete their application to request a transcript. In fact, we're asking that they just go ahead and request the transcript to the schools so that we can get everything pushed out in a timely fashion. There are some on the counseling website, there are some tutorials, some films about how to request college transcripts. So we really are asking, November 1st is right around the corner. We would like to get everything out as soon as we possibly can. And we're also looking at our data to see how many students we're really talking about. Of course, we're feeling for our seniors because everything is done virtually. And we typically walk them through this process very individually and collectively. So we're trying the best we can to make sure that we have everything, they have everything they need to apply for college. And that a big part of that is requesting their transcripts. And also just a shout out for everyone for planning for the future weekend. We saw a number of kids who were working on their essays during that weekend and a few seminars, and Ms. Carr put that together for us and did a really nice job. So those are just a few reminders. It's more specific to seniors right about now. It's their season, so we definitely want to do a little bit more to just get the information out to them. And then the other piece that I would be remiss if I did not address in some way, although I can't speak too much about it, is the allegations that came out in the arrest of Mr. Papadopoulos. We really are focused on making sure that we are working with and checking in on all of our students. And so counselors have been doing outreach in that regard. And I encourage all of you, if there are any questions, concerns, please reach out to me, administration, counselors. This is shocking. This is incredibly terrible for our community. And our first priority is to make sure that our students are taken care of, that they are safe, and that we are the adults helping them to understand the situation. And if there's any information they have, that we address it and that we turn it over appropriately. So that has been the work of the counselors and administrators, particularly this week, but it's ongoing. So I just wanted to mention that as well. And lastly, like I said, we are all working together to understand and to make sure that this virtual environment is the best that it can be for our students and for our families and our staff. And there's just a lot of challenges with it, but I continue to appreciate your feedback. I continue to appreciate your patience and your partnership in what we're trying to do here and pull off. So again, when we do have the survey at the end of the marking period, I hope you'll share your feedback so that we make it better for our students as we move forward for second marking period. And I think that's it for me tonight, Mr. Raven, unless there are any questions or anything specific I can address.
I think that's it. We'll turn it over to
Okay.
Brian and to introduce our guest speaker for the night.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So we are so pleased to have such a great topic tonight, very important topic, the college admissions process in the time of COVID. I know it's a challenging time for everyone, and we could just, I'm just thinking about our seniors that are getting ready to apply to college, and there's a lot of things that are changing around the college admissions process. So I'm very pleased to have here tonight with us Jody Gershoni, who's a founder of College Unlimited. She's an independent educational consultant based in this area, and she's helped students nationwide gain admission to dozens of US colleges and universities. We also have with us tonight Chase Gabrielson, who is the founder of Star Tutors, an educational technology company founded in 2017, which aims to reduce the cost of private tutoring and test prep in order to reach more students nationwide. We're so pleased to have both of them here tonight, and I will turn it over to Jody. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so Nikki, I just pushed share screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Bear with me, guys. Hold on one sec. Okay, everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, good. Just to let you know, I'm a little technologically behind the times, so bear with me on this one. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Nikki. Thanks, Ms. Bolden, again, for inviting me to speak to your PTSA. I don't know who's on here, but I spoke last year on just regular college admissions. And now that the world has changed quite a bit, they invited me back to talk about college admissions post-COVID. With that said, I have asked Chase Gabrielson, who is an expert in standardized testing, because I have a feeling that many of the questions are going to be in the testing realm of things. So I'll do my best to cover the general overview of what I know about life after, COVID with respect to college admissions. And then Nikki, if it's okay, I can ask people to write questions in the chat box. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, so if you guys have questions, just put them in the chat box and we will do our best to answer as many as we can. Okay, so before I start, I want everyone to also know that I am a Montgomery County public school mom, as well of 3 kids. My first, who is a freshman in college. So I've been through the process, not only as a counselor, but as a mom. So I totally get it. And I'm with you on all the stresses that go along with college admissions. But if I can do anything for you guys right now, it's just to say, hey, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. And I promise you, they're going to have a really great college experience. Okay, so let's start. All right, we're going to cover 3 things on this presentation. 1 is recent changes in the admissions process post-COVID. 2, key components of the college admissions and how to be successful. And then 3rd is a big question on everyone's mind: to test or not to test. And I like to reference back to an old saying, that is the question. I have spent literally, since the quarantine started, weekly meeting with colleges, multiple colleges a week, presenting to us on what's going on in their worlds, what changes are being made, how they're being made, how these guys are figuring out how to evaluate students when, so many things are going on in the world that aren't predictable like it has been for the last, over 100 years. College admissions, as we all know, is a little bit of a dinosaur. It hasn't really changed. There's been movements of change, but no one's really done anything substantial until now. So the pandemic is it's a scary thing, but it also, here, hang on one second. I think I skipped a slide. It also is bringing some opportunity to college admissions. It is allowing the dinosaur to kind of look out and say, okay, what can we do during this pandemic to learn how to evaluate students in many different ways other than just grades and test scores? And there is a huge movement, which I won't go into too much detail, on how to kind of quantify character traits in the admissions process. So what these admissions people are trying to say is that besides grades and test scores, they are seeing that there's a huge correlation to success of the student in college and post-college just based on character traits. You know, how academically curious they are, how kind they are, how driven they are. Those types of things are being really hard driven into college admissions readers to see if they can pull out in the applications this year, knowing that other quantifiable and measurable traits aren't going to be there. So like I said here, it's changing. They're trying to adapt. And every single college that I met with, literally all of them, has reinforced the fact that they are human. So they are also going through the pandemic. They know there's changes. They know your kids have been put into a weird situation where they, you know, a lot of stuff has changed in their end, and they know that. So they're going to read the application knowing that it's going to look a bit different. So everyone's in this together. Okay. All right, so this slide is important because while these changes are still happening, I want you guys all to rest assured that the 5 pillars of college admissions are still important. And I'm going to go through these here because I'm going to show you how they're important and how they've changed just a little bit. So number 1, high school rigor and grades. No matter what, the most important thing in your college application is showing that transcript. How is that student chosen to take you know, what has been offered to them under the umbrella of their high school, and how well did they do? So your students all go to Wootton High School, and most admissions offices in this country are divided regionally. So there's typically a representative in an admissions office that is responsible for Maryland. And that person gets to know the high schools and an understanding of what's offered. So they're going to see, you know, student X application comes in and they're going to say, okay, he's from Montgomery County, Maryland, and he goes to Wootton High School. So before they even look at anything, they know that it's a pretty rigorous high school and there's going to be a lot of rigor offered. So how did the student choose to take his or her classes within high school? So that's first and most important looked at when they're evaluating the application. Number 2, test scores. And I'm going to do this quickly because I know Chase is going to cover it in more detail at the end, but test scores are still important when available. So I know a lot of you have students that their testing dates were canceled and they either weren't able to take the test or they took it only once and they weren't happy with their score. We're going to cover that because it's okay. And I want you to know that it's okay. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Number 3 is the student resume. And I wrote, do what you can, because we all know our activities have changed since the quarantine hit. You know, sports were canceled, plays were canceled, you know, debate practice was canceled, everything was canceled. So what colleges are going to look at is, okay, what is this student interested in from when he or she started 9th grade, you know, and how did that progress? And then when the quarantine hit, what happened? How did the student choose to use their time? And there's places on the application to show that. And then quickly, I'm going to talk about essays and recommendations. These are still very important, and they're almost more important than they were before the pandemic hit, because it's an opportunity to really sell yourself, to really talk about those character traits that you do so well, you meaning the student. So if a student is driven, I want this student to really use examples of how they're driven so that the college can see proof of that and know that you're going to be a driven person on that campus come freshman year. And then lastly, in green, it's a little bit lighter, is demonstrated interest. If you are interested in a college, let them know. You can do this in many ways. It doesn't have to be physically visiting the campus. You can email, you can call, you can do virtual tours. There's all sorts of ways to let the school know, which helps them understand that they're a really serious school for you. So that's very important. Okay, next slide. All right, so I don't know exactly the makeup of who's on this call right now, but the next two slides I divided into, this particular slide is going to cover seniors. So the seniors that are graduating in 2021, I'm going to talk about a little bit alone, and then I'm going to move on to the parents of juniors, sophomores, and freshmen. All right, so for 2021 grads, so the 5 pillars of admissions that I just explained are important to everybody, and I want you to kind of keep those as gold. If you're doing those 5 things, you know you're going to be okay. But these points right here are kind of highlighted just based on the age of the kid. So for 2021 grads, it's very important to use all of the application to demonstrate your personality and strengths. Every single bit of that application should be answered. If it's optional, it's not optional anymore. If there's opportunities that the school says, hey, you can include this or you can include that, try to include it. Because what the colleges are telling us that they're looking for is anything measurable. So anything that they can see to help them get to know the student, they want to see it. So if you see that on your applications, depending on what schools you're applying to, do that. The second point is submission of test scores. Like I said, they can help if you have them, but what the colleges are telling us, and I wrote they swear, because they literally are saying that if you have not had an opportunity to take it this year, 2021 grads, it's okay. It's okay to apply test optional. I mean, I work with a lot of students every year and they come to me and they say, can we really apply test optional? I'm really scared. And you know what? We're all taking a leap of faith here, but the college admissions people that I've been meeting with, and that's a lot of them, are saying it's okay to do that. The third thing is, and this goes to the first part of what I said, which is show anything that's evaluative. If you have, typically in the past, AP scores weren't used during the admissions process for much. For the most part, the testing that they focused on were the ACTs and SATs. Now, if you have good AP scores, if you have any subject test scores, if you have a graded paper and the college allows you to submit things, submit it. They want to see as much as possible. And then lastly, it's important to know your schools. So when you're creating your school list, and I'm assuming since I'm focused here on seniors, you're probably almost done with your applications. I want you to review again what each school is asking for, because every college, they're all different. So every college is looking for, little different nuances in the application. Make sure you know that before actually submitting. Okay, so that's for 2021 grads. All right, 2022 and beyond. So for all these younger kids or younger parents of younger kids that are on here right now, pretty much everything I just said goes for your student as well, because I honestly believe there's gonna be, it's gonna go a little bit back to the way it was, but it's not gonna go fully back so quickly. So I promise you that all these components of showing character and showing everything you can to demonstrate who the student is to the college is still going to be important. So again, use all parts of that application. The test score requirements are changing every day. So this year, I think it's 85% of colleges are test optional. And with that said, I just saw a statistic of almost 60% of students applying to college this year have not had an opportunity to take the test. So what they're seeing is if more tests are offered next year, then probably some schools will change their policy and start requiring the test again. With that said, there's many schools that are already saying, hey, we're going to do this as a trial. We're going to continue our test optional policies for a few years. Like a big one, a popular school around here is University of Wisconsin. They've already announced their test optional for 2022. A lot of the smaller liberal arts schools are test optional. Elon, Indiana, I'm just thinking of popular schools around here. And there's a growing list. So just check those requirements as you build your list. The next point, showing versus telling. So if anyone understands that when you write something, it's on a college application, it's truly your only way to introduce yourself to the college. So I can't stress enough the importance, because of the pandemic and because they don't have these measurable traits, is that you prove what you're saying. And the way to prove what you're saying is to show versus tell, which means use examples. So if you're going to demonstrate to them, or you're going to say to the college within an essay that you are a driven kid, I want to see examples that prove to me that you're a driven kid, because that's the new measurable trait. And then lastly is finding good fit schools, which is always the case, but more so now than ever. Do your research, know which schools you're applying to, so that you can create stronger applications. Typically, schools have that question that says, why this school, or why do you want to apply to this school? The more you know about a school and the more you've identified that it's a good fit for you, you're probably a good fit for them. And that's going to show even more so now than ever. Last slide, and I'm going to throw it over to Chase to talk about testing. I don't know how many of you are seniors or parents of seniors on this call, but if you're not, the Common Application and the Coalition Application, which are the two popular applications that probably hold over 1,000 different schools in this country you can apply to on either of those two applications. They've thrown a new question on the application, and they call it optional, and it's a 250-word optional essay. And the reason they did this is because they wanted to avoid having the thousands and thousands of main personal statements be about what I did during quarantine. Okay, so but they knew it was an important part of the student, so they added this question. And it's a really long prompt, but I typed it there just so that you guys can see it if you haven't seen it. The whole gist of this is that if something happened that impacted the student, the family, the well-being, the safety, anything during the quarantine pandemic process, this is the space to write about it. So I have a lot of students that I work with that didn't have something negatively impact them in a terrible way. So, they say, what do I do? What do I write about? Do I even answer this? Just like I can't stress enough, don't leave anything blank. Yes, you answer it, because essentially the quarantine, it impacted everybody. So even if you are a, normal Montgomery County kid that plays sports and has their activities, but you come home to a nice warm house at night with, your nice warm family and dinner, that's awesome. But your life was changed too. So what did that mean? What did that mean to you? How did that make you feel? How did you spend your time? A lot of these kids, all their activities were canceled. And so they spent their time getting to know their distant cousins that they've never had time to do. That's huge. That shows a lot about a person's character. And that's the type of stories that need to be put on this 250-word optional essay. So it's not required, but I highly recommend thinking really deep as to how did this pandemic affect me. So you probably have a lot of questions, but I want to open this up to Chase. Chase, are you on here?
I am, Jody. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Just tell me when to switch your slides.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you guys so much for having me. I can't imagine, both from a 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th grade perspective, as a parent, as a student, I can't imagine, what you guys are going through. But certainly from a resiliency standpoint, over the last 6 months, I can't speak highly enough of these students and their ability to just continue to work hard and work through these different adversities that truly no other student has seen, probably in 2 or 3 generations since maybe World War II, and having to deal with all this stuff in such a short amount of time is really a testament to them. So first and foremost, thank you to all of the parents and students who are continuing to work hard. I know there's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of anxiety especially for the junior and senior class on any year, but given that it's that all this stuff has gone on, I think that there's probably equal anxiety. I've already seen some questions come in the chat for Jody and I, and you know, in those questions, it's you can kind of feel that ability, that uncertainty. And so I want to give you guys some, you know, I want to give you guys some comfort in knowing that you're not in this alone. Jody and I are certainly happy to answer questions about any of this stuff. And in terms of testing and SAT, ACT testing, I'm going to try to give you guys a little bit of a perspective as to, you know, what has been in the, you know, what the testing requirements have been in the past, and what I envision them coming, what they're going to be going forward. Certainly for the next couple of years, I would say, at least for the sophomore class, which would be the class of 2023, I believe, and the class of 2024, the ninth graders. I think my math is right there, hopefully, right? But for that class as well, I hope that I can speak to them as well. The last thing that I want to say is Principal Bolden said something that was really, I jumped on and coincidentally heard her speak just briefly, and she said something that was very important. It's very, very important for testing. And this is actually more for parents than students, if you can believe it. She said, control what we can. And we use that line, control what you can control. We use that line consistently in our classes. And it speaks very, very highly of you know, what these tests really mean. So with that in mind, as many of you guys know, there are the SAT and the ACT, and you can see this on the slide that Jody has up right now, has been largely required. Let's call it 98% of universities have required the SAT and the ACT over the past 25 years or so, one or the other. And you'd have to submit that in order to even apply to college, to be considered an applicant. And that's what was called testing required admissions. Now, given all of the uncertainty that's happened over the last 6 months, fortunately, almost every school, I can't think of any off the top of my head that have not moved off of testing required, so that all of the senior class will not have to submit an SAT or ACT test. And then the junior class, for the most part, many universities have already said that the class of 2022, the junior class, will also be test optional. But the most, probably the most frequently asked question always, and certainly over the course of the last 6 months, has been, well, what do these really mean? You know, what does testing required mean? That's a pretty easy one to understand, but I think there's a misconception what testing optional might mean. There's a thing called testing flexible admissions, which I'll talk about, which I'm a big fan of. And Jody kind of talked about it a little bit already. And then there's a test blind admissions, and that's what most people, I think about when they are thinking test optional, but those two are very different. So I wanted to give you guys some perspective on what that meant, and then hopefully answer any questions that you guys have on that. So you can see on this slide, again, this one's pretty straightforward. This was still adopted. I said still adopted in stated policy for the majority of universities, with the exception of the classes of 2021. And I'd say 50% of universities have declared that this will be optional. This will be an optional requirement for the class of 2022, though not all of them have stated that yet. And then beyond that, you know, I think, as Jody mentioned, there's going to be kind of a reckoning in terms of what colleges decide that they want to do. There are certain, just to give you guys a little bit of perspective about this, there's the SAT and the ACT take a lot of shots on the chin. They are kind of the, anytime anything goes wrong with the college admissions process, those two are usually the ones that take the brunt of that. And it's not to say that it's a perfect system. It's not, and there are things that need to be changed. But in light of that, you know, one of the largely majority proponents, everybody kind of agrees that the AP tests on the flip side are very, very positive. Most people view those very positively. Basically, you can pay $50 to get your student college credit, and even Ivy League universities will accept AP scores as college credit. So $50 to take a college class is something that's really, really unique. And the College Board, who writes the SAT, also writes the AP exam. So I think there's a flip side to give everybody some perspective. And again, this goes along with this testing flexibility idea. But for all of the brunt that the College Board and the ACT take in terms of, you know, the college admission scandal that happened last year, the College Board does do a lot of things, and the ACT does do things that they're trying to make this better. In some ways, you know, in these test scores, testing required is probably not the best way, and I think they've realized that. So I don't anticipate many schools going back to testing required after the class of 2022, though I could be wrong. In any case, Jody, if you want to hit the next slide, this next one, testing optional. is the one that I anticipate most colleges have adopted this, and I anticipate them continuing to adopt this going forward, with the small exception of a couple different student types, and I'll mention those as well. So testing optional, very different from testing blind. Test optional means that if a student is not required to submit a score. So to be considered as an applicant over the past 20 years, you had to submit an SAT or an ACT score, but now you don't. And that's very different, though, that if you do submit a score, if you do choose to take the test and you do submit a score, the score will be considered as part of the application process. Testing optional, long before COVID happened, to name a prominent example of this, the University of Chicago, which is one of the top 10 universities in the country, if not the world, has been test optional for about the last 10 years. You were not required to submit a test, an SAT or an ACT test score to apply to the University of Chicago. However, having said that, about 90% of applicants over the last 10 years, 90% of admitted students over the last 10 years have chosen to submit a test score. So again, that just gives you a little bit of perspective on what a test score can mean. I know that a frequently asked question we have on that note is, well, if I don't submit a test score, and this is probably moving on to beyond the class of 2021, because as Jody alluded to, many students have not actually had the opportunity to take the test this year. But beyond the class of 2021, the class of 2022 will have the opportunity. And I realize that there will be mask mandates likely in most schools to take the test, but colleges will largely overlook that, to be honest. So our company is based in Los Angeles. Los Angeles has had some of the strictest lockdown in the country, including the Washington, D.C. area, I think is similar. But the LA County just allowed public and private high schools to start hosting the exams again, given that there's social distancing requirements, mask mandates, obviously, while you're taking the exam. But that gives colleges a little bit of a get out of jail free card in terms of saying it's not test blind. If you do submit a score, we're still going to accept it. So I just want you guys to be aware of that, because I know it's something that comes up pretty frequently. You know, how much if I don't submit a score, does that mean the college is going to think that I didn't do well on the test, which gives me less of an opportunity? I know those things come up. So going to Jody's point of saying, do kind of all that you can, that's my recommendation. I'm a huge proponent of testing optional. I think that it takes a lot of stress off of students and a lot of stress off of parents. I think that it allows students to be students again, rather than thinking from, it's amazing, but students go from 8th grade where they're talking about, where you have recess still, you have whatever, you get to go out and hang out with your friends during lunch in 8th grade. And then the very next year, if you have a student that is very ambitious, could be being asked, what do you want to do with your life? I mean, that's a crazy transition in 6 months to go from 8th grade to freshman year when you start thinking about these things. And I do think that the test optional requirements and the test flexible requirements, which I'll talk about in a second, take a lot of that stress away from students and parents, which I'm a big proponent of. So those are the those prominent. So testing required and testing optional have been by far the most prominent over the course of, now going forward for the next 2 years and then over the last 20 years. However, I'm the biggest proponent of my experience doing this for as long as I have and working with as many students as I have, is the testing flexible admissions. So for the student's sake, I'm still a big believer that tests are a really important thing. As long as colleges have 3-hour finals at the end of the school year, at the end of the semester, then that's a really stressful environment. What we say to our students our students in class is, if you want to be a rocket scientist, right, and you want to go to MIT, and you're the person that is going to put the last heat shield on the space shuttle, right? SpaceX with Elon Musk, you're going to put the heat shield on the space shuttle. That's a pretty stressful job, right? If you're a doctor, if you're an orthopedic surgeon, and you have to make these, kind of crazy decisions, or brain surgeon, you have to make these very stressful decisions, and that's where this testing can be really, really helpful. However, the one thing that I'm very against is that the colleges require it to be the SAT and the ACT. So what testing flexible admissions mean, and this is again more perspective for the sophomores and freshmen this year, testing flexible is something that I think most universities are going to go to, where rather than having to submit an SAT and an ACT score, those will still be an option. But instead of having to do that, you can submit 3 AP scores. or 3 subject test scores for the SAT. And this is something that NYU is the major university that has adopted this policy for, again, going back for 5 or 10 years or so. They have allowed students to submit a 3 AP scores. And for somebody that's, very narrowly focused on math or very narrowly focused on English, this policy makes total sense, because if you want to take the AP Calc, AB exam, BC exam, and AP Physics exam, but you don't want to, you don't have to submit your SAT English score, SAT Writing and Language, or ACT English score, then you don't have to. And again, I think this testing flexible takes a lot of stress away from parents and students, but still puts a lot of emphasis on testing, because again, as long as colleges are going to have 3-hour tests where you're graded on a scale and you're graded on a curve against the rest of the student body at that university, then it's going to be important that students have the ability to take these exams. And on top of that, I do think that there's from a state level, if you're looking at the University of Maryland, for example, University of Maryland is a fantastic university, fantastic academic university. And from a state budget level, to take away these tests is going to require a significant more manpower, at least in the short term, to have to read through these essays and kind of definitively decide what qualifies a student to go to this university or doesn't, and how are they going to respond academically. So in that case, because of state budgets alone, I do think that there's going to be some form of testing going forward. I'm just not convinced yet of what that exactly is going to look like. And then the final one, and again, this is the comment that we get from parents probably most frequently, is the difference between test optional and test blind. Most parents and students, I think of this test optional and all of this as test blind, which means that if you submit a score, the colleges will essentially throw it away. They won't look at it. They won't consider it. It will not be included in any part of the application. Up until recently, test blind was really only adopted by very small liberal arts schools that weren't even going to look at the test. That's opening up the University of California system just for the class of 2021 it's a legal thing, but they're going back and forth on whether or not it's going to be test blind for the UC schools or test optional for the UC schools. But for the most part, again, most schools are test optional, which means that if you do submit a test score, it will be considered. It won't hurt you, as Jody said, or colleges are saying that it won't hurt you, but it will be considered as part of the application process. How much it's considered or what that looks like is largely, I think, up to the university and varies from university to university. And so just the final thing that I want to mention here before letting Jody come back on and talk about this. Again, the majority of majority of schools are opening it up to test optional now. That means that they will consider the test score if you do submit it, but it's not a requirement anymore to apply to that school. As Jody has said, again, I think it's very, very important that students do submit or try. I understand if you're not able to take the test in any capacity, then of course you want to write that as a note on your college application saying, look, I wanted to submit a test score, but at no point was I able to submit when I was going to take the March 2020 ACT or SAT, and that was canceled. And up until now, there hasn't been another SAT offered for me, so I wasn't able to take that. And you can communicate that at some point in your application, and I absolutely would. Otherwise, if you do have the opportunity, colleges, as Jody said, they're going to be regional directors, and there will be an opportunity for them to look at these test scores. So I do encourage you to continue to consider these, particularly it's certainly for the junior, sophomore, and freshman classes. I would absolutely think that this is going to be an important part of submitting things. But again, taking off this pressure allows you to decide whether or not you want to submit the score. You can take the test and then make that decision. One final thing, just as a note, for anybody applying, if your student is applying, or if you are applying as the student to any specific program, so engineering is not going to lose the requirement for testing. You're still going to be 99.9% certainty that if you apply to an engineering school, if you apply to a math school, a technical university in any way, or physics majors, really anything STEM related, they're still going to require you, especially at elite universities, to submit a test score. So that's one thing to consider. And then the other one that's almost assuredly going to be a requirement is if you're a student athlete. Student athletes, because it's relatively easy to grade manipulation is something, unfortunately, that's relatively easy to do, especially if somebody is in that type of position. And so student athletes, because of that, colleges almost exclusively look at these test scores when yeah, especially elite universities. So if you're looking to play a sport at an Ivy League school, we have a number of students that have done that, over the students that are at current Ivy League schools playing sports. And in our experience for student athletes, the only real thing that has been asked about or considered by coaches in terms of whether or not they're going to recruit your students, Stanford is another good example, is whether or not you have the test requirements that are going to be considered, that are going to be accepted into the university, whatever that might be. So that's it. That's all I have to say in terms of that. And I'll turn it over to Jody and let her finish out here, and then happy to answer any questions related to the testing stuff.
There we go. I figured I had to unmute. Thank you, Chase. Hopefully you guys, I know that was a lot of information. Here, I'll stop sharing. There we go. Hopefully you guys got something out of that, and we were able to help you at least think through, where you're at, where you're going. And again, I can't stress even more and more and more is that just follow what the specific schools that you're applying to are calling for, because they're all different. And, we're in it for the next few years, and we're just going to have to keep rolling with the changes. So let's go to the chat. All right.
Jody, I think you had one on there that was related to internships. That was the first one I think that came through.
Okay, so internships were canceled this summer. Will this weaken college applications? No, because everybody's internships were canceled this summer, but I highly recommend including that on your application somewhere. So whether it be in the additional information section, whether it be on your activities list, you can actually say accepted for, such and such internship, was supposed to do X, Y, and Z, but it was canceled, so the more information, the better.
Yeah.
So hopefully that answered.
And yeah, Jody, I was just going to add to that on the college application, there is a spot there's like an optional 500 word spot where you can include additional information. And usually that's not used probably nearly as much as it's going to be used this year, but there's an opportunity for you to communicate with the university, why you're, and they're going to know this, as Jody related, they're going to know, that not many students have the opportunity to be in an internship, to have a job, to do activities this year. But in any case, as Jody said, if you were accepted, we'll be able to communicate that for any 9th and 10th and 11th grade parents, because I know that you guys probably haven't seen the application yet.
Yeah, and on that note too, back to the COVID essay spot, the 250 word optional. Don't use that. This is what I am hearing. Do not use that to say, it was terrible. My internship was canceled. My soccer practices were canceled, and my life, was boring. Do not give a running list of what was canceled during COVID, because everything was canceled and they know that. Go deeper than that. Use that space to let them get to know you. So that's just one other thing I want to say. Okay, next question. Maybe this is the same. How does a student position the COVID status of their community? For example, our kids are completely remote and other students taking the same AP exams and other tests are not remote, which I have to believe will impact their scores. Okay, so this is where, and Mrs. Bolden, she might have something to say here, but your counselors, when they submit the transcripts and the letters of recommendation, will also send a school report, essentially. So the reader of the application is going to know what status the community that you're from, what status we had. We had all online school. Everything was canceled. They're going to know that. So when they compare your application to, little Johnny from small town Georgia, where nothing was canceled, they know. So they're going to take all of that into consideration. And from what I'm hearing, and I'm telling you, I've met with dozens and dozens and dozens of schools, it will not hurt you. Okay. With that said, again, use examples, show as much about the student as you can through examples, through your essays. Here's another piece of advice. If you're, if you believe, or if your teachers that are writing your letter of recommendations haven't done so yet, make a meeting with them and say, listen, I'm applying to X, Y, and Z schools. It would mean a lot to me if you helped bring out these attributes. I really feel strongly that I have, I'm a huge amount of academic curiosity, and I want that to show. If you have that conversation with your teacher or your counselor who's writing a letter of recommendation for you, that's fair. They'll probably be happy that you talk to them about that, and that, they'll be able to use examples from their classroom of you showing academic curiosity. So it's kind of a long answer, but hopefully that helped. Next, for a parent of a 9th grader, what are the checklist items for this year? Okay, this is probably a longer question, but like I said, it's all about upward trajectory. So an upward trajectory of where you start in 9th grade to where you end up your senior year. So what, they want to see you adding rigor each year, and they want to see you doing well in the additional rigor that you're adding each year at the level that works for you. Don't push it too hard, and don't not push it at all. Just give incremental change each year that shows that you care, that shows that you want to learn, that shows that you're excited about education. So from a 9th grader, I would say make sure your schedule fits you and that you're working really hard on it and you're doing really well. And then once you choose your next year's class, make sure you add a little bit of rigor. The other thing I would say is, and with COVID, it's hard, obviously, because activities are shut down. Think outside the box. What can you do during a pandemic? We all could be doing more community service because those opportunities do exist. So even though you can't play your sport every day, which is really sad, and I have 3 athletes in my house, so I get it, have them do their exercise, but also look for an opportunity to do some kind of community service. That would be helpful this year. And then lastly, I would say is just start developing a good relationship with your counselor. I'm a huge believer in the power of communication, and the more open you are as a freshman, the more your counselor gets to know you, and you'll have that positive relationship going through the next 3.5 years of your high school, and that'll show on your college application. That advice actually was given to us by, my kids go to Richard Montgomery, and the principal told us that on day 1 of my kid that's in college, her first 9th grade year. So I always say that to my students. Okay, let's see. Okay, can you please recommend an online resource where college admissions requirements are listed, so we don't have to hunt and peck across dozens or hundreds of universities? Okay, I have good news and bad news. The good news is every college lists exactly what they want for their requirements, but I can't stress enough that it is important to go to each individual school. You shouldn't have 100 schools on your list anyway, but I don't think there's like the 5 pillars that I gave you, that's the closest I can think of to a general list of what's important for college admissions requirements. But other than that, every school is different. I mean, your principal will tell you, people always say, how many recommendations do I need? Every school is different. Some will take 1, some will take 2, some will take, 2 academic teachers and 1, outside person. Literally every school is different. So I'm sorry that there's not a specific list, but my biggest advice is do your research to find good fit schools, because I'm a big believer that, a sweet spot is about 8 schools to apply to. You shouldn't need to apply to a lot more than that.
Hey, Jody,
Okay.
yeah,
Yep.
just real quick on that note, piggybacking off that, and then actually kind of leading into that next question, which was about what should parents do. this is perhaps a perspective because I'm not a parent and you know, have seen enough students, if you can believe it, over the last 7 or 8 years. Through our programs, I've taught over 1,000 students through math, SAT, and ACT work. And one of the things that I constantly see is no matter how much you know the parents, especially going into that junior year, it's really, really easy to get sucked in. And I call it chirping, where students are just constantly hearing about the process and I got this score and I got this score and I got these grades and oh, I'm going to get into this school. And trust me when I say that students are already going to be under enough pressure, unfortunately. When it comes to this stuff, they're already going to feel it. They're going to feel anxiety. So, you know, from my perspective, the students that have had the most success, I think, or parents and students really in navigating this process have been the ones where the parents are not hands off, but are not, you know, not pushing as hard as they possibly can for this. Because one thing that you should all remember, and again, this is advice I think from seeing as many parents and students as I have, is that the kids should still be kids. These guys are 16, 17 years old and they just learned to drive, and that's an exciting thing, or they're going to prom, or I can tell you definitively that I am not, there's nothing that I say or anybody that's talking about SAT or ACT prep that's going to get your student up in the morning and be like, man, I can't wait to go see Chase today and talk about ACT stuff. That's never going to happen. And so if we already know that, I think continuing to push and push forward is going to only make it, you know, more stressful. And with regards to testing, the students that are the most relaxed in this process are the ones that are going to do the best, the ones that understand that there's a longevity to this. To give you an example, a couple of years ago, we have a student, I won't say her last name, but her name is Rachel. She's at University of California, Berkeley, studying data science now. One of the things we hear from parents and students all the time was, my student's just not a great natural test taker. And that might be true, but after seeing Rachel, who started out with a 970 on the SAT, so that, to give you some perspective, the national average is right around a 970. Rachel, she wouldn't have qualified herself as a great natural test taker. You know, her parents probably didn't either. But Rachel set a goal for herself, I think it was May of her sophomore year of high school, that she was going to improve one concept every week. One concept every week, she was gonna learn that concept, and once she had it down, she wasn't gonna miss it. And the SAT is graded that every question you answer correctly is basically you gain 10 points on the test. Over the course of a year, 54 weeks, Rachel gained 54 weeks of concepts. And on her final test, as a May of her junior year or June of her junior year, she ended up scoring a 1510, which is in the top 1% of all students that take the test. I can definitively tell everybody in the group that there is not that had nothing to do with me as a teacher. I didn't say something crazy to her that just made the light bulb go off, I'm sure. It was all about her work ethic and her ability to just stay focused and stay the course without thinking that the next result had to be the one. And June of her junior year rolls around and she scores in the top 1% of all students and ends up going to a university and getting into a program that probably wouldn't have been possible, 12 months before that. And so as you start to look at your colleges and look at your college approach, don't necessarily let the test score, influence you one way or the other. If you feel like you have a hardworking student, and if you communicate that work ethic is going to play way more into the testing than anything else, then they can get there. We're happy to provide additional free resources for everybody to make sure this SAT and ACT stuff goes well. But the hard work is going to pay off in a major, major way. And then the sky's the limit on a lot of this.
Yeah, and to add to that, from a checklist standpoint, and I should have hit this, so I'm glad Chase did, but from a testing standpoint, if you're thinking of a timeline, I always say that if you have a plan the summer before your junior year, just a plan, a timeline plan of when you think you want to try these tests, and then backtrack of when you want to start preparing for them, then I think that's something that that you can feel good about. I always say like 90% of it is the organization. So just from a ninth grader, it's still too young, but as you get a little bit older, just kind of have like a mental plan of when you want to take these tests, and then you kind of backtrack of when you think you should start preparing for them.
Yeah.
And like I said, as much as the world we don't know about test optional, test blind, test whatever, you still got to focus on them.
Yeah, and
saying that.
Yeah, no, Jody, it's important, and it's important as Jody just said, starting early. We, Jody and I have spoken a number of times on this, but if you start early with the mindset that it's starting early to prepare, for an example, parents might remember this, but there's there's on the writing and language section of the SAT or the English section of the ACT, the highest level of English grammar that's tested is punctuation. And I'm not talking like crazy high level James Joyce punctuation. It's like semicolon usage. If anybody remembers that old animated video from the 80s, that's like conjunction, junction, what's your function? Good thing I'm not a professional singer. But if anybody remembers that video, that is the conjunctions are tested on the SAT in a very meaningful way. And so again, as Jody alluded to, if you start out this process earlier without the expectation of like, I'm starting early because I have to be super competitive, and you just encourage students to like Rachel did, review one concept a week and keep it pretty light and keep it mellow. And as long as they continue to work hard, it's going to definitely be it's going to be a lot better process. Jay, to your question on the 1550, I wouldn't take it again. If your student has scored anything, Harvard just came out with a study that said that anything 34 to 36 on the ACT and 1480 to 1600 on the SAT held no additional weight. So basically, once they knew you could test at that level, they didn't consider it. So it almost became kind of a sorting, almost like a sorting algorithm to say, okay, we feel comfortable that this person can take a final at Harvard and not feel totally overwhelmed. But beyond that, it didn't help in any way. So that was an internal study actually done by Harvard, and so 1550 is totally good.
Yeah, and
yeah.
To add to that, especially with this year, 1550 is gonna be even higher than it was 2 years ago because so many people couldn't take the test over and over again. So real quick, and thank you, Ms. Bolden, for answering a lot of these too. And I should have said this, but these high schools, MCPS high schools, do still have extracurriculars. I mean, we do at RM as well. And, you just have to go on the announcements to see what's available. But that stuff still looks really good for colleges. Your student is getting involved. There's leadership opportunities. They're thinking outside the box. Maybe they can try something they've never tried before, because not everything is available. I think that that's terrific. And I'm pretty impressed with what MCPS has been doing. Let's see. Best advice for parents going through the process: take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. I mean, honestly, as a counselor and as a mom who's been through this, I think doing your research to find the good fit schools is by far the most important, because I promise you, if you learn enough about a school and you're excited about the opportunities that it provides, most likely your student's going to get in, because that means if they're a good fit for you, you're probably a good fit for them. And when you reach too high or when you reach too low, that's going to show a lot more if you're not really doing your research. And I know it's difficult because you can't physically visit a school yet. Hopefully you will in the near future, but there's lots of ways. You know what, Nikki, are you still on here? I don't know how to do this, but
I'm here.
I created a form of how to research schools during COVID. I should have put it on here, but Nikki, if I send it to you, you can get it out to everybody.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll do that later, but it teaches you how to research a school when you physically can't go visit. So I recommend doing that. And also, if you do have time and you are in, wanting to physically go visit a school, obviously being safe and taking all those precautions, even if they don't post on their website that they're having tours, call the admissions office and say, listen, this is a weekend that we're traveling to visit family or whatever, and my son or daughter really wants to, or better yet, have your son or daughter call, say, I really want to visit the school, and maybe they will, set them up with a student, or, a one-off walking them around. So that's a piece of advice. I'm trying to go through these as quickly as possible. I know we're running out of time. Is there a source to filter schools by specific requirements? Not really. It's too broad. There's too many schools and too many nuances that are going to do that. Are they offering the SAT this year? I'm assuming, I don't know exactly what you're asking, but yes, it's just, it depends on the location. So certain states are offering it more than others. Maryland has, different counties have offered it more than others. I have heard in the last few weeks, and Mrs. Bolden might be able to attest to this, that more schools are offering it. So some kids have been sitting for exams. So yes,
Jody,
it's just, yeah.
Yeah, and I would just add to that it almost guaranteed that they're at some point, because the senior class is almost done with exams, and they're going to be very test optional for seniors. Obviously, things are changing every day for the junior class, but as of right now, again, Los Angeles County was one of the strictest lockdown measures over the course of the last 6 months, and the county just announced that they were allowing public and private high schools to host the exam. So as of right now, it's almost a guarantee that there will be SAT and ACT testing nationwide. Again, that can change, and Principal Bolden might have a better understanding of this, but I know at least from LA's perspective, it's been pretty, and that was a big step to let those things happen. So for the junior class, you should have the opportunity to take it. And with regards to the requirements, every school is test optional for the senior class. I just saw that one. Every school is test optional for the senior class. For the junior class, about 50% of schools have announced that they will also be test optional for the class of 2022, the junior class. And I would imagine that all of them are going to be test optional when all is said and done. I actually think test optional, like the UCs have announced they're going test optional for the rest of time. Having said that, again, I wish colleges would do a better job of explaining exactly. There's so many nuances to all of this. For example, the University of California, Berkeley engineering program is one of the best in the country. There's almost no way in my mind that the University of California, Berkeley engineering, or MIT, or any of these major STEM programs in particular, if your student is applying for anything with math and science related, that they won't be requiring some form of testing. Now, that might not be the SAT anymore or the ACT anymore, but then instead you would have to submit as an engineering potential major, you'd have to submit your AP Physics and your AP Calc BC exam as the requirement. And so I just think that's, just different a little bit.
I just
One
wanted
thing to add, go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say in terms of MCPS, we went to a meeting actually today, and they're planning for 9 test sites for November and December administration of SAT. And they're prioritizing seniors though. So seniors will be prioritized. There'll be fee waivers, transportation. And I believe that MCPS will be messaging that out to communities very shortly. We received this information today. So I'm sure as long as safety continues to hold out in the way and the health conditions that will roll out. And it looks like PSAT, they're planning to give the PSAT to juniors in January. And again, this is just today, we're finding out some of this. So hopefully we'll have some more information shortly and that'll be publicized to our communities.
Thank you. Thank you so much, because I have a junior, so that's helpful. But so the other thing about testing that you guys have to be wary of, and less so much for the seniors this year, because I think schools have figured this out, but Merit Scholarship, which is the scholarship that is given to kids just based on grades and test scores, has largely been attached to the test score. Okay, so this year, colleges are saying that they will still be offering Merit Scholarship based on more of just grades and the other parts of the application. But I'm not convinced that 2022 and beyond, it isn't going to bring back that test score requirement to kind of attach to a merit-based scholarship. So, I mean, like I said, I have a junior and I'm meeting with colleges every day, but I'm still having her prep for a test because A, I don't know where she's going to go yet, and B, I don't know what we're going to need for all those elements, such as not just admissions, but merit-based scholarship. So do your homework, talk to the schools before you decide if you're not going to take the test or not. I wish I could give you like, okay, today we just decided we don't have to take these tests anymore, but it's not going to be that way for probably quite a while. So maybe your grandkids won't be taking these tests. Hopefully.
Well, yeah, and guys, and that's always a good thing too. I know that we're running out of time here, but I just want to continue to reiterate the point that was made earlier about, this should be offered to everybody. Fortunately, I think that the private testing industry is there's no way having to spend so much money to it is very inequitable at this point, unfortunately. But there are some very, very good things about testing, and particularly with how the higher education with colleges are set up. It's really important in a lot of ways, but I do think the testing optional, the testing optional admissions policy is just so much better because it allows students to prepare, to continue to look and work and take these exams, but also build up other aspects of their lives, be kids, work on their grades, work on their extracurriculars, hang out with their friends, and then work on this test as well, just in the equal proportion that they have for everything else. So I just wanted to add on to that because I think it's important to know that testing optional is probably a really good thing overall.
Brian, Nikki, I think we're done unless people have more questions.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you. Thank you for the really informative presentation, Jody and Chase. We really appreciate it. And people have questions, or is it possible for them to be able to reach out to you?
Yeah.
Us and we can reach out to you.
Yeah, how about I'll send that COVID researching schools, and I'll send our contact information as well.
Yeah, Jody, I'll send out a link to parents tomorrow with the recording of this. So I'll send a link to the forms as well. I'll post them on our website.
Okay, so I'll email them to you
Yep.
this evening.
That's fine. I'll do that in the morning.
Okay. Okay, cool. Thanks for
Great.
inviting us, guys.
Yeah, guys,
Yes.
this was great.
Yeah, thank you for joining us tonight. We really do appreciate it. Our next PTSA meeting will be on November 17th at 7 o'clock, and we will have a guest speaker or speakers talking about mental health during COVID. So please join us for that meeting. Thank you, everyone, and have a great night.
Yeah, and before everyone signs off
Oh,
real
yes.
quick, there's a virtual coffee chat with Ms. Bolden on Friday. So I'm going to be sending a link if anyone wants to submit questions. I'll do that tomorrow as well.
Thank you, Nikki.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great night. Thank you.
Bye.